Well, you want to talk about quarterbacks. I don't know if you heard about a certain individual. He didn't get talked about whatsoever on draft weekend there. But our good friend, Mr. Shedeur Sanders, who you want to talk about franchises that can't develop quarterbacks, the Cleveland Browns and their 40 quarterbacks since 1999 that they've brought in. For those that don't follow the NFL closely, you might think that's hyperbole. It's not. It's 40
It's not.
quarterbacks. I looked
Yeah.
at the stats. It's exactly 40 since 1999 when they rejoined the league. Now, you and I have very differing opinions on our friend Mr. Sanders here. But all that to say, before we get into the did he get blackballed, what happened here, all the kind of show around the show, just the fit, and you look at what that Cleveland Browns quarterback room is with Deshaun Watson, and you've got Dylan Gabriel in there, you've got Shedeur, you've got all these quarterbacks under contract. Like, in what world do you think Shedeur is a starter this year? And how soon do you think that's going to be?
So you hit the nail on the head when you said the fit is just a very, very strange one because of the moves they've made prior to getting into the draft. And then going into the draft, making another move to add to that quarterback room before they even explored getting Shedeur in there.
Yeah.
Now, when I look at the skill set, the personality, and the fit, I mean, the skill set's there in my mind. You look at him as a classic pocket passer. He's tough. He's accurate. Two biggest traits that you want out of a quarterback. He stands in the pocket, right? When he makes plays, they're usually pretty good, right? Like they're good plays. They're not fluke plays. They're not some of these things where he's chucking it up and his receivers, Randy Mossing over top of the defensive backs. He's hitting them in stride. He's throwing them to the sideline. He's making the proper reads. So I look at that as those are all positive things that when I look at a guy like Shedeur, again, you have to take the personality into account, but I look at that as being secondary. Can the guy play? The answer is yes. Then when you look at why he dropped in the draft, excuse me, it was essentially because of that big ego, that big personality that people perceive it to be. Now, you can take that one of two ways. One, obviously the University of Colorado had a lot of eyeballs on him because of his father, kind of recreating what he was doing at Jackson State at Colorado. Did they bring a lot of negative attention towards them? Absolutely. But in today's NIL driven university landscape, you kind of need to stand out from other schools. So Dion brought in a very, very unique, personality and a very unique brand to the University of Colorado, and it's worked. Like they've turned that team around in 2 years, which is not, for the faint of heart. So I think that a lot of people who will look at that and say, well, that's not what we want in our building. Well, you probably haven't built a culture that can accept that type of personality in your building. So again, whether that's right or wrong, you can't really foresee that until you actually get people in the building. Overall, I think with the five quarterbacks that they've got in their quarterback room, you look at who has the highest ceiling. Well, Shedeur has the highest ceiling out of the five quarterbacks there because you've got Deshaun Watson, who's not even going to play this year and was given, again, people could talk about this contract until, the cows come home. Even the owner has admitted it's the worst contract that we've ever given out, right? So wiping that mistake aside, you've got Joe Flacco, who, hey, the guy just keeps kicking around, solid, as they say, solid locker room guy, still can, put the ball downfield. Um, he's probably the leader in the clubhouse right now as it stands. Then you've got both of our favorite backup quarterback, Kenny Pickett, who's
Super Bowl champion
Super
Kenny
Bowl
Pickett.
champion Kenny Pickett, who he's going in there to start and he's going in there to compete. And yeah, we'll see where that nets out. But I think people see where Kenny Pickett's career is right now. I don't think that his skill set has translated well from college to the pros. Unfortunately, it happened with both of the teams that we so affectionately root for. Um, but he doesn't really pose a big threat. He's obviously going to be a good second or third quarterback on your roster. If you need him in a pinch, he might make a couple of plays here and there, but not your long-term answer. And then you look at the other rookie that was picked, Dylan Gabriel. I had Dylan Gabriel as like quarterback 10 on my big board. I was never a fan of him when he was at Central Florida. I was not a fan of him when he was at Oklahoma. And I definitely wasn't a fan when he was at Oregon because anybody who watched that college football playoff, you kind of see what Dylan Gabriel does when the lights get a little bit brighter. And it's not pretty. Because that Ohio State team was very good, obviously the eventual national champs, but Dylan Gabriel looked like an absolute deer in headlights, even though he was in his sixth college football season. And that shouldn't be happening. So when you look at the fit, I don't like the fit because Cleveland, as you mentioned before, 40 quarterbacks since 2000 or since 1999, not a good stat to have. And then Kevin Stefanski seems to have his magic, kind of running away from him right now because he hasn't been able to put a competent quarterback out there in years since Baker Mayfield left. So I don't really know what's going to happen with that room. If I were to kind of, put things in the crystal ball and see where things are going to net out in the future, I would say that they're probably going to run with Joe Flacco. They're probably going to have to cut Kenny Pickett. And then it's going to be the winner of Shedeur and Dylan Gabriel, who's going to be the backup. And then the other one's going to be on the practice squad.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see things playing out as well, too, right? So it's going to be all right. Again, maybe you get a little Deshaun sprinkled in there. Depends where he is in kind of recovering from injury number, God knows how many at this point here. But maybe you get some interesting kind of training camp battles going on there if he's able to get back onto a field somewhat near the start of the regular season. But again, the clubhouse favorite here is going to be Joe Flacco. You go out there, you ride your defense. You're going to hope that the run game is able to win you some ugly contests in the early going here. And if you're able to stay competitive, Flacco probably stays under center. If this team is 2-6 by week 8, like,
Why not?
why not? Right. And so I don't really see a world unless the absolute shock of the century comes here and the Cleveland Browns are vying for the AFC North title, which again, don't see happening. But barring that, I don't really see a world in which Shedeur is not taking starter snaps at
Yeah.
some point this season, right? So it kind of comes to where, you and I in our assessment of the fit, I think are in lockstep, but the skill set, I think we're diverging a little here. So a lot of people had Cleveland taking Sanders, but a lot of them had them taking him in the first round, right?
Yeah.
Or at least the first quarterback off the board here. So in your mind, make the case to me of what Sanders is in terms of a quarterback who could have potentially gone in the first round. Because in my mind, even when the sports books were making him the odds-on favorite to be the number one overall pick, I did not have him as one of the 32 best players in college football.
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned the traits that I really like the best about what he brings to the table and what I look for in quarterbacks that, I've coached in the past and what I kind of look for when I'm, kind of scouting and watching, other teams play. Can the quarterback make a throw under pressure? So Shedeur Sanders checks that box. Does the quarterback get rattled after he gets hit? Shedeur Sanders gets that checkbox because if you saw any Colorado games, he got the absolute tar beaten out of him, right?
52 sacks in 2023, 42 sacks in
Yeah,
2024. He's
yeah,
taking a beating back there.
yeah. And I mean, he bounced back. He makes timely throws even with pressure, right? So is the quarterback accurate? Can he make the throws you need him to make in, the mid range, in the deep range? Well, he checks both those boxes because he's very accurate and he throws on time, right?
Does he check both those boxes though? I'll give him short and medium routes. Absolutely. 74% completion percentage there.
Mm-hmm.
But like one of the big knocks is like the deep ball just it doesn't seem to be there for him. It's not something he can reliably, like, he doesn't have a big arm. He's an accurate passer for sure. So that's
Mhm.
where, in my mind, he is absolutely an NFL quarterback, but he is
Yeah.
more, in my mind, of a game manager. Like, he's more Ryan Fitzpatrick to me than he
Mhm.
is Peyton Manning or something like that that's got a big arm.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I go as far as the Ryan Fitzpatrick, but again, I mean, you're looking at a guy who played in the NFL for over a decade, and he was a starter on multiple teams. Now, when I look at a guy like Shedeur Sanders, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Philip Rivers, right? Because again, he's
He doesn't
not.
have any kids yet there. He would have needed to have started a while ago if he's getting up to what's Phil up to? He's retired. He might
No,
be up to 17
I don't
now.
know. I don't know. Yeah, he's getting bored, just has to get more kids out of there. But he kind of reminds me a lot of Philip Rivers because Philip Rivers was that big body quarterback, like well built, not incredibly mobile, but still can pick up a first down with his feet if he needs to. And he's going to pick you apart in the mid range, and that's kind of what you want to see out of a quarterback. So now, when I look at kind of where the fit goes into the NFL, you want Shedeur Sanders to be in a West Coast style of offense, right? Where it's going to be timing, it's going to be get him on the move, it's going to be moving the pocket, it's going to be hitting running backs out of the backfield, it's going to be hitting slot receivers, like clockwork, over the middle, and then taking the occasional deep shot to these big receivers on the outside.
Which
So
is not the Cleveland Browns
which is
offensive
not the
scheme
Cleveland Browns.
whatsoever.
Exactly. So that's why when I saw the fit with Cleveland, I said, it's probably not going to work, which is why I wasn't surprised they took another quarterback. I was just surprised they took Dylan Gabriel. So again, I look at kind of the teams that needed quarterbacks coming into the draft. The two teams I didn't think he'd work with were the Cleveland Browns and the New Orleans Saints. I don't think that he would have fit in either of those systems because he's just not that type of quarterback. But when I'm looking at quarterbacks, again, like I mentioned earlier, he checks enough boxes for me. And again, the coach in me says personalities are a good thing. You just have to know how to tap into them. So the problem with a lot of coaches and managers in the NFL, and this might be a shocking statement to you and everyone listening to this, their egos are very fragile. And they and they don't like to be told that they could potentially be wrong on something. So when they see somebody with a big personality, they're going to look at that and say, well, that's going to be difficult for me to manage. And I forget who said it the other day. I think it was Ryan Clark, actually. And they said, well, New Orleans didn't pick Shedeur because they didn't know if Kellen Moore could handle his personality. And Ryan Clark said, well, he shouldn't be a head coach then. And that's 100% accurate because anyone who's willing to take on the responsibility of being a head coach, well, guess what, Kellen Moore? You're not just an X's and O's guy anymore. Like Sean McVay was an X's and O's guy. He figured out how to work with players and manage personalities. It's not an easy thing to do. So if you're a coach or a manager, you need to be able to work with these guys because they all come from different backgrounds. They come from different walks of life. They come from different families. You got to be able to tap into those personalities and use it as a positive. And as a quarterback, I want my guy to have a little bit of swagger and confidence as opposed to the meek, quiet Zach Wilson type of quarterback who we all see what's happening with him. The moment gets too big for them. They can't bounce back when something goes wrong. So again, you can call me crazy if you want. I see enough positives with Shedeur and his skill set and his personality that as a coach, I would be able to tap into and utilize to my own advantage.
Yeah. Had they not been in Las Vegas, where I think Shedeur and his very large entourage, let's call it what it is here, could have gotten into some off-field trouble, I would have loved to have seen him go to the Raiders, right?
Yeah.
Especially with our good friend Mr. Ashton in the backfield there now as well, scampering all over the place, and a Brock Bowers, and take a season, kind of be under Geno Smith there, hand over the torch eventually. You've got Tom Brady involved in ownership there. Like they're a franchise that I'm a little bit shocked with the fact that he went as far as he did, right?
Yeah.
Like, had he gone in the second round, it's like, okay, you didn't use your first rounder on him, whatever, right? Like, you got your future potential Hall of Fame running back here if injuries don't derail him at this point.
Yeah.
So not going to fault him for that pick, but when you get to round 544th overall, that's where it's like at a certain point, like Browns GM Andrew Beria had the perfect quote there, where he ended up saying, once it got to a point where it felt like it was a pretty steep discount, we just felt like, especially relative to the alternative ways that we could use this selection, this made the most sense. Like
Yeah,
there were 31 other NFL teams that should have also probably been saying that as well too, right?
yeah,
So whether you needed a quarterback or not, like talent is talent at the end of the day.
yeah.
So my stance has never been that Shedeur Sanders is not an NFL quarterback. He absolutely is an NFL quarterback. In my mind, though, he just was not a round one quarterback. So when he fell
Mhm.
out of the first round, was I shocked? No. In the second round, once it started getting to the late second round, I'm like, okay, well, maybe he pissed off enough people in the interview process there that, they're sending a message and, top of the third round, he'll go. Third round, fourth, now we're in the fifth round there. That's where it's like, okay, we all see what's happening now, right?
Yeah,
Some people have pointed to, oh, it's racism, or oh, it's this, or oh, it's that. It's no, you hit the nail on the head when you said people don't realize that the NFL does not exist in a vacuum. If it did, you would just auto simulate it with random names on a draft board, and you would always take who is the highest overall. Oh, he's an overall 87 in Madden. I'm going to take him, right? The
the New
friggin'
York Jets style of
I was going to
drafting.
say the New York Jets drafting policy there. So like that's not how it works though, right? Like we've all heard all the anonymous executive, it was the worst pre-draft interview in 20 years and all that stuff getting floated out there ad nauseum. No one wants to put a name on it, right?
And see that's the problem with these fragile egos is that if you're not man enough to put your name behind a quote, don't say it.
Yeah. Well, if you're not man enough to say that you're the one trying to ban the tush push until it gets leaked, don't propose that you guys can't figure out how to stop this thing and we're going to take our ball and go home. But, anyways, Green Bay Packers, that can be a topic for another day. It really is message sending because people have to realize that number one, locker room chemistry is a big thing. So,
Yep.
putting aside, even if this was Bob Smith instead of Shedeur Sanders, that is something that people are taking into account. But what a lot of people are missing in all of this narrative here is the fact that, like you said, there are some big egos at play here. And a lot of these QB needy teams are fully aware that they are one, 4-win season away from seeing a flamethrower get taken to them. And they've all got families and kids and mortgages and big egos, and they like being recognized everywhere they go in town and this big man on campus and hey coach, right? So are you going to put your gravy train on the line here for someone that you are not 100% sold on, even if they are talented? Probably not. And that's why he slipped, right? I think there's more to it that's being made out of this story, largely for clicks and reads and
Yeah.
sound bites and all of this that everyone wants to get in their hot take on why should her dropped. No, the truth probably was, again, we're not in the room. He did act immature. He probably didn't take it as seriously as he should have, right? You got the big, two legendary. He spent close to $1 million on his pre-draft room. The NFL doesn't allow you to do branding. They made an exception to allow him to have his S Money sign chained on. All of that stuff there, right? And people just went and said, "Is this the guy I want to potentially get fired over?" And 32 teams said no. And eventually someone came around and went like, yeah, but, and I
Yeah.
think it was safer for the Cleveland Browns at that point to say, we got 5 friggin' quarterbacks here. Like, might as well roll the dice on someone. We've already gone out and drafted someone that we can kind of point to as like, oh, look, rookie QB in waiting here. So if Shedeur comes in and acts like a prima donna, we've got that break in case of emergency, even though you're not a fan of Mr. Gabriel, aka quit on the Sooners. But again, it really is just a much simpler story than I think people are making it out to be, because the stats are there, right? You don't throw
Hmm.
for 4,000 yards and, the most accurate FBS Div 1 career record completion percentage in all of college football history since they started tracking that stat. Those things
Yeah.
don't grow on trees or happen by accident. So the talent's there,
Hmm.
but I do kind of hope that this serves as a bit of a wake-up moment for him. I don't know if it will, but time will tell on that one. But it's 100%. If anyone tries to sit there and say this was not collusion or NFL owners trying to send a message that, like, no, no, like, it's a privilege to play in this league, and if you're not going to take it seriously, you're going to cost yourself $40 million going from the first round to the fifth. They're lying to you, because it absolutely was.
Yeah, and lost in this fact because if Shedeur wasn't the one who fell, the whole talk of the draft would be how far Quinn Ewers fell down the draft as
Yeah.
well. Because again, you're talking about the number one overall recruit in the country a few years ago, goes to two big schools in Ohio State and Texas, goes to the national semifinal twice. Like this guy should be a lock stock, first rounder without question. And why is he falling down the draft into the seventh round? Well, again, there were some immaturity questions around him. There were, product of the system, like the offense performed better when Arch Manning was in the game and whatnot. But again, who knows? We're not in the room when you're interviewing these kids. We're not in the room when you're talking to their coaches about what they say. Like there's so much that goes into scouting that not a lot of people are privy to.
Yeah.
So, you look at it's not just the Shedeur Sanders of this draft. It's a lot of these players who it's like, man, I can't believe that guy's still sitting there. I
Yeah.
can't believe that guy, didn't go until this round, right? So every year it happens. Every year we're shocked by who it is. And it's going to continue to do that because, again, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And a lot of times when we look at people, we're saying, that's the type of guy that I want to run. I would want my franchise to be built around. Where you get someone with a fragile ego or who's looking, very trigger happy because they've, their job is on the line. They might be making some snap decisions that they normally wouldn't make, in another scenario.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say on Mr. Sanders there before we move on is just right there again, building on your point of the fragile egos. It's also a little bit of the Dion factor as well too, where you can sit there and say as much as you want that no, no, I'm happy at Colorado. Oh no, I'm happy at Colorado. If the Dallas Cowboys had phoned him up this offseason, he would have gone, and he wouldn't have even thought twice about it. So depending on where he ends up landing, right? You've got someone who has, no, not taking anything away from him. He has turned around two programs, right? In
Yeah.
Jackson State and in Colorado, and he's had success, and he's able to recruit, and he's a big personality, and he's a known commodity in NFL circles, and he has respect, and bah, 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 bah. You can keep stacking all these things up. And we know that he enjoys coaching, and everyone who's coaching in the college ranks, like, people will go from college to the NFL and then come back and be like, you know what, I had my cup of tea, this is where I'm going to settle down. There's not too many that are offered a shot at the NFL and are like, nah, I'm never going to even try it, right?
Yeah.
So it's are you bringing in your own replacement potentially, of if things go sideways, you've just got Deion Sanders in the owner's ear of like, oh, the things I could do. Oh, I've raised my boy. I know what he can do. I could build this offense around him. I could do this, that, and the other. I'll take you to a Super Bowl in 3 years. We're gonna get more, season ticket holders. We're gonna get more advertising. We're gonna get this, that. Like, we'll make you a national brand there, Cleveland. Do you really want to bring that in and potentially cut yourself out at the knees by mid-season? I don't know, right? A strong-willed coach who has a strong culture and has ingrained himself in there and is getting on-field results, they're not too worried about that, which is again kind of why, going back to Las Vegas, like, is that not the perfect scenario of like, Pete Carroll, God love him. You can hop on a surfboard as much as you want, but you're nearly 100 friggin' years old at this point. Like, you got to move on at some point. Otherwise, we're going to wheel you out there in a
Yeah.
wheelchair with an oxygen tank at some point. So, like, would that not have been the perfect kind of transition of, Shedeur goes there, transitions, he gets like 1 year under Gino, he maybe starts the next year, Pete Carroll maybe does one more year, or Dion comes in as like an assistant coach and then he takes over, and like, there were just so many synergies that they're the one franchise that really shocked me that they didn't go out there and do it, right? Like, if you've got Lamar Jackson, you're probably not going to go out there and draft, Shedeur. So there are a bunch of that I knew wouldn't, but that's not a franchise that's got a quarterback that is set for the next 10, 15 years. So, like,
Yeah.
they were a bit of a head scratcher for me.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I didn't even think about, the transition period with Pete Carroll and whatnot. And honestly, I'm now that you mentioned it, it's actually more shocking to me that the Raiders didn't take a chance on him later in the draft. Because again, being a Pittsburgh fan, I'm sitting there saying, okay, if they can get him in the third or the fourth, fantastic. Now you've got a guy who has a first round grade, who you're paying him fourth round money, you know, everything kind of checks the box. Again, I talk about checking boxes. That checks the boxes of filling a need, getting the best player available, and doing it at a discounted rate.